Shalom Haverim. That's a Hebrew way of saying welcome, dear friends, to this video, which is an introduction to Hebrew School. Hebrew School is a course of instruction. I will be making lots of videos um, regarding Hebrew School, which is a course designed to learn to read, write, and speak biblical and modern Hebrew. I think it would be appropriate for me to perhaps give a little bit of a personal testimony and provide a little bit of my background, which will give you some indication of why I'm interested in doing this and maybe some qualifications that I've got. My story with regard to the Bible and to the biblical religion goes back to when I was a young child. My parents raised me in a mainline denominational church. We went to worship services and Sunday school when I got to be that age on a regular basis, just about every week. We would do that, and I loved that part of my life. I loved the church. In fact, one of my earliest career goals was to become a parish pastor, like our kind of elderly parish pastor at the church that we attended. I also wanted to be a professional hockey player. So I was hoping to be able to work out those two kind of careers simultaneously. When I got to be confirmation age, the denomination of the church we attended regularly and traditionally confirmed young people when they got to be 12 or 13 years old. And it was about that time that the pastor that we all love so much reached the age of retirement. He stepped aside from leading the church. And our next pastor was a young man who had just graduated from a mainline denominational seminary. And we noticed some pretty dramatic differences in the way our former pastor, our retired pastor now, had ministered in the church and how our younger pastor was ministering. Our old retired pastor was a Bible believing, gospel preaching, wonderful man who loved us all. And then when he was replaced, our new pastor, our younger pastor, had been taught at this seminary what pastors are taught in many, if not most, of the seminaries in our country and in our culture, and that was that the Bible was of questionable authority, that it was filled with lots of contradictions and mistakes and so forth. And a lot of the stories, particularly the supernatural ones, we were told that those were not to be taken literally. And basically, what my parents heard from him was that the Bible is not reliable for matters of faith and life. And so my parents concluded that if the Bible's bogus, there's no point in attending this church or orienting our lives around God and His Word. And so they basically quit attending the church. I must say I was not too sad about that because I was just approaching confirmation age, and the way confirmation was done in that church, like in many churches, was confirmation students would get up early on a Saturday morning and spend a couple of hours in the church studying the Bible and the Christian faith and so forth, and preparing us to be mature, responsible adult members of the congregation. And at that point in my life, I had lots of other things that I would prefer to do with my Saturday mornings. And so I was not too unhappy that we stopped going to church. But because I did, I kind of departed from the foundational Christian beliefs and so forth that had been provided for me in my younger years. It was not until 1980 when I was serving in the military, flying fighter planes for the Marine Corps out in Southern California, that I did become a believer in Jesus Christ. My wife was a devout Christian. She challenged me to read the Bible. And so I began reading it, and God's holy and powerful word just transformed my life tremendously. At that point in time, I still had 2.5, 3 years left of military service, and one of my pastors had recommended to me that I might want to consider, um, if I got out of the military, and I was planning to, that when I got out, I should consider going to seminary myself. He suggested a more conservative, Bible-believing seminary than my former pastor, and I got pretty excited about that. So I used that 2.5 or 3 years to prepare myself theologically as much as I could. I became a leader in the church that we attended in California, and I will tell you though that one of the things I was dreading about going to seminary was the foreign languages that I was going to have to learn. The theological stuff, the historical stuff, leadership stuff, the pastoral care things were not that intimidating to me, but the languages were. I was going to need to learn two brand new foreign languages, and I had never been that great with languages, and so I was a little bit concerned with that. Not so much with the Greek, because the familiarity that I got with the Greek kind of gave me a little confidence that I could recognize many, if not most, of the letters Greek read from left to right, which was what I was accustomed to with English. And when I took Greek classes, I did okay. I did fine with that. But Hebrew was just really scary to me, because of, as I looked at Hebrew letters, I recognized absolutely nothing. And I was told that Hebrew reads from right to left, and that was going to be a whole new orientation. I was told, as I'll be mentioning in a few minutes here, that Biblical Hebrew was written without vowels. So I was only going to be able to look at consonants. That turned out not to be true, as we will learn in our lessons here. But when I started Hebrew classes, my plan was that I would take as little Hebrew as I could. The only goal I set for myself was that I would be able to read an English Bible and look up in a lexicon or a Hebrew dictionary what the original word was and what the meanings were, and just do word studies, basically based on an English study of the Bible. But when I started Hebrew, it just was one of the most fun things that I did at seminary. All of the language courses that I have taken in my life, and earlier in school, I had studied Spanish, I'd studied German, studied a little bit of Latin, even in college, and then, of course, Greek and Hebrew in seminary. And every language course I had ever taken. And one of the reasons it was challenging for me is because language courses, learning the grammar of a foreign language, is so boring. There are usually textbooks that are a couple of hundred pages long, and they're just filled with charts and diagrams and paradigms and all kinds of rules and regulations about the grammar of the language. And that is sleep-inducing stuff. And I would really struggle to stay awake and comprehend what was going on in language classes. And my Greek classes were very much like that. But Hebrew was a little bit different. Yes, there were some charts and some paradigms and some rules and regulations that I had to learn. But I found Hebrew to be a very exciting language and a very fun language. So once I realized that, I took everything I could, every Hebrew class that I could at seminary, and just enjoyed it to the utmost. After graduating from seminary and pastoring several churches, I pursued continuing education in graduate schools. I studied Hebrew Bible and Hebrew language at a Jewish graduate school in the Cleveland area. And then after that, I also studied mainly online Hebrew courses, Hebrew studies from several different sources, including the, what's it called? It's the online Hebrew instruction from Hebrew University. They also teach biblical Greek online and, of course, other theological things. It's the Israel Institute of Biblical Studies, I believe. So I did that for a while, and I'll be sharing in the course of this introduction another online Hebrew source that you may be interested in. So without further ado, let's continue with the introduction here. A little bit of background about Hebrew. I'm reading a book by a scholar from way back from the late 1600s and early 1700s named John Gill. And John Gill wrote a very scholarly book on the first bullet point here, that Hebrew may very well be the first language of creation, the language God and Adam and Eve spoke. There is some pretty good evidence of that. All of the names associated with the early chapters of the book of Genesis are very significant and symbolic and communicate a message that doesn't make any sense in any language other than Hebrew. So Hebrew may very well be the first language of creation. I would just take that a step further and say Hebrew may very well be the language of heaven. I guess for us believers, when we get there, we'll find out. But I would not be surprised to hear Hebrew spoken and written and read in heaven. Next bullet point: the Old Testament was written in the Hebrew language. There are a few exceptions to that general rule. There are portions of the Old Testament that are written in the Aramaic language, which is kind of a sister language to Hebrew. It's an offshoot of the Hebrew language. That's the language that was spoken in Babylon. And if you're familiar with biblical history, the Babylonian captivity took place in that part of the world where Aramaic was spoken. So there are some, just a very few chapters in the Old Testament that are written in the Aramaic language. But Aramaic is similar enough to Hebrew that you can kind of figure out what it says. If you know Hebrew, you can kind of figure Aramaic out. There were some Aramaic influences in the Hebrew language. Some Aramaic words came over into the Hebrew and have been identified in the Dead Sea Scrolls and some Second Temple era documents that have recently been uncovered. Next bullet point is, some scholars believe that many of the New Testament books were originally written in Hebrew and then translated into Greek later for an international audience. I don't want to just throw that out there without giving you some evidence of that, some documentation for that. So let me share a couple of quotations here. The first is from Irenaeus of Smyrna, who was a Christian believer who lived in 180 CE. CE is the common era. It's the same as AD in the BC AD paradigm of measuring historical years. So Irenaeus said that Matthew, he's referring to the Gospel of Matthew, also issued a written gospel among the Hebrews in their own dialect. That means that Irenaeus was convinced that Matthew wrote the Gospel of Matthew first in Hebrew, and then it was later translated. About almost 100 years later, Origen of Alexandria wrote that first gospel to be written was Matthew, who was once a tax collector, but later an apostle of Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach in Hebrew, who published it. Matthew published it in Hebrew, the Hebrew language, for Jewish believers. And then Jerome of Syrian Antioch, and also Jerome lived in Bethlehem for a while, lived about 400 CE or AD, wrote that Matthew, who is also known as Levi, and who from a publican or a tax collector came to be an apostle, first of all composed a gospel of Christ, of Mashiach, in Judea in the Hebrew language, for the benefit of those of the circumcision of the Jewish people who had believed, who later translated it. He's indicating here that Matthew translated it afterwards, after that in Greek. Actually, he's indicating that whoever it was who translated it afterwards into Greek is not sufficiently ascertained. Moreover, the Hebrew itself is preserved this day in the library at Caesarea, which the martyr Pamphilus so diligently collected. Jerome says that he himself was also allowed by the Nazarenes. Nazarenes is the name, it's a Hebrew term. It's the term that the Christian church was referred to really decades before it was called the Christian church. Christian is a Greek term. Nazarene is a Hebrew term. And the early Christians were known as Nazarenes long before they were called Christians. So Jerome is saying, I was allowed by the Nazarenes, the early Christian church, who used this volume in the Syrian city of Berea, to copy it. So not only had Jerome seen or heard that the Gospel of Matthew was originally written in Hebrew, he saw it and he was allowed to make a copy of it during his life. So all three of these sources agree that the Gospel of Matthew was originally written in Hebrew before it was later translated into Greek. But then Jerome adds another statement, which is very interesting and also pretty powerful. This saying begins, Saul, and here he's talking about the Apostle Paul. His Hebrew name was Saul of Tarsus. Saul, being a Hebrew, that is, being Jewish, that is his own tongue and most fluently. So being Jewish and being a Hebrew, Hebrew was naturally his native tongue and the language with which he spoke most fluently, while things which were eloquently written in Hebrew were more eloquently turned into Greek. So what Jerome is suggesting here is that the Apostle Paul wrote his books of the Bible, and what are we talking about? 12, 13, 14 books of the New Testament. Jerome is asserting that Paul wrote them originally in Hebrew, and that they were later translated either by him or one of his scribes, one of his assistants, into the Greek language. So this is some pretty powerful, it's legitimate, pretty powerful evidence that it may very well be that the New Testament books were originally, many of them were originally written in Hebrew, if not all of them, and then translated into Greek for an international audience. This is a road that we could go down and study and spend a lot of time debating, but for this purposes of this course, we are going to just kind of ignore the fact that the New Testament documents may have originally been written in Hebrew. And the reason we're going to do that is because there are no documented evidences of that other than the claims that were made by those three sources. In other words, we don't have any ancient manuscripts of the New Testament that are written in Hebrew. Now, that may be because they never were written in Hebrew. It may be because they were written in Hebrew and then lost, or it may be because those documents were written originally in Hebrew and they were destroyed, even perhaps by church leaders, Gentile church leaders, who were trying to de-Judaize the church. for various reasons. It is a tragic part of Christian history that the Jewish believers in Jesus, in Yeshua, were persecuted by the Gentile believers in Yeshua, and basically many of them were driven out of the church and just treated quite badly. But we do have very old Greek manuscripts of the New Testament, and the evidence of their existence and the quality of those manuscripts are very great. So we are going to assume, with almost all of biblical scholarship, that the New Testament books, which were written in Greek, either translated or originally written in Greek, are the Word of God. They were inspired by Him. They are without errors and contradictions and so forth, and are totally reliable for faith and life. But in the course of our studies here, we will be looking at some Hebrew translations of the Greek New Testament, and we will be appreciating and understanding that those Hebrew translations are just that. They are translations. They are not the originals. We'll give them as much credit as we would give any other translation of the Bible. Continuing with the background, the culture of the entire biblical era was a Hebrew and Jewish culture. So no matter what language the Bible was written in, the culture that it represented and it described was definitely a Hebrew language and a Jewish cultural environment. Maybe of interest to you that the Old Testament, although clearly written originally in Hebrew, was in the 2nd or 3rd century BC, or BCE, if you prefer, was translated into the Greek language. It's known as the Septuagint, and that is a translation of the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek that was used extensively by the New Testament writers, either when they translated their Hebrew originals into Greek, or whether they wrote originally in Greek. The Septuagint was the go-to translation for them. There are not any claims that I'm aware of that say that the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, is inspired by God and without error, inerrant, to the same level that the Hebrew Old Testament was, or even the Greek New Testament for that matter. Next, after the Roman conquest of Israel in 70 AD, the Hebrew language continued in Jewish culture as a holy language. What that means is that when the Romans came and destroyed Israel in 70 AD, of course, many Jewish people of the land were killed. Many were enslaved, and others were just banished to foreign nations. They were banished, north, east, south, and west, all compass directions. And of course, they entered into foreign Gentile countries, and they had to assimilate into those cultures. So they learned the language of the lands in which they lived, and that would be the language of their everyday speech and so forth. But one thing the Jewish people did, no matter where they lived, they continued to worship and read the Bible in the Hebrew language, and it was the language of their theological writings and their theological heritage. So Hebrew has been preserved for 2,000 years now by Jewish people living in other countries and so forth. In the 19th and 20th century Zionist movement is a movement of immigration, the return of the Jewish people to their promised land. Jews from all over the world, banished from their promised land 2,000 years ago, are now in pretty massive numbers returning to Israel and populating that country. And again, the major numbers and the most significant movement was during the late 19th and throughout the 20th century, continues even today. And during that time, the Hebrew language was revived and became the official language of the modern state of Israel. Modern Hebrew is very close to biblical Hebrew. Modern Hebrew includes a lot of new words that describe new technologies and inventions and cultural differences that have happened in the 2,000 years since the Old Testament was written. But again, very similar to biblical Hebrew. And if you study the revival of the Hebrew language in modern times, there is a man named Eleazar ben Yehuda, who was really almost solely responsible for encouraging immigrated Jewish people to Israel to learn the biblical language, the holy tongue, the holy language of Hebrew in modern times. Features of Hebrew, things that kind of set it apart. Hebrew, unlike English, reads from right to left. A Bible scholar named Chuck Missler has asserted that all countries that lie to the east of Israel, their languages read from right to left, so that the direction of reading is in the direction of Israel, and that all countries that lie to the west of Israel read from left to right, so that the direction of their reading and their writing goes in the direction of Israel. And I haven't studied that thoroughly, but I believe that's pretty accurate. Biblical and modern Hebrew are normally written without vowels. So typically and normally, Hebrew is written as a consonantal language only. Now, that might sound very challenging, and might be challenging to try to figure out, well, how do Israelis distinguish between one word and another that are similar, that have the same kinds of consonants? It's really not that challenging, and you can do it in English pretty well. You can read English pretty well without the vowels. But students learn, and scholars, Hebrew scholars, normally use a text with vowel points. The vowel points are called the nikud, and let me explain why. Right here is a line of a Hebrew text. In fact, it's the first verse of the Bible, Genesis 1:1. It starts here on the right and reads in the direction of, it reads in a leftward direction. The large letters that you see here that are kind of front and center are the consonants. They're all consonants. Now, the little symbols below those letters, the dots, either vertical or horizontal dots or singular dots, the little T-shaped symbols, the triangular shaped symbols, these are all the vowels, and vowels are normally located below the line, below the letters. Sometimes right here is a dot that is above the line or above the kind of the main top of the Hebrew letters is also a vowel. So those are called the nikud because nikud in Hebrew means dots or spots. And that's what these things look like. So we will refer to the vowels that we will be using as the nikud or the vowels. And we will be using pointed texts or Hebrew text with the vowels. And the greatest advantage or assistance of the vowels is that it will help us pronounce the words the way they should be pronounced. we won't be substituting the wrong vowel for the right one and mispronouncing the word. So the vowels will help us learn to pronounce the words of the Bible correctly, and that is one of our goals. Finally, here on this page, Hebrew is a pictographic language. If you're familiar with hieroglyphics, it's almost like that. And let me give you an example of Hebrew as a pictographic language. Just a second, continue on here. Here is a chart of the Hebrew alphabet. There are two columns of symbols here. Those are the Hebrew letters. They start with the Aleph. That's the name of the first letter of the Hebrew Aleph Bet, or the alphabet. This is the second letter, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, and so forth. This column here begins with the L, or the Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samik, Ayin, Pei, and so forth. Those are the letters of the alphabet. And then in the column to the left is what those letters, those symbols stand for. In other words, the Aleph stands for an ox head. Now, that may seem to be a strange symbol for a letter of the alphabet to stand for, but an ox was, in the biblical era, a very important animal, a very strong animal, an animal that could be depended on to work very hard. It was an animal that would produce a lot of good things by its labor. It provided leadership for smaller animals. It was an animal that was considered a clean animal, so it was an animal that could provide sacrifices and so forth. As you look at the symbol here, if you use your imagination, this part of the letter could be the head of the ox, and here are the two horns. We will look at some older examples of the Hebrew alphabet, and there you'll see that the symbols are even more closely associated with what they represent. The second letter of the alphabet can be pronounced either bet or vet. And that letter, bet, is the Hebrew word that means house or tent. You may be familiar with the city of Bethlehem, which means city or town of bread. Here it's depicted as a tent, which is a place of safety, a place of love, a place of fellowship, and so forth. So the B usually has that kind of significance when it's used in words. G, or Gimel. Gimel is the Hebrew word for a camel, and here the camels are symbolized here. Camels are known for traveling and carrying heavy loads and so forth. So a lot of the symbolism of these letters is agricultural in nature and significant to farmers and shepherds and so forth, and so on and so forth. We don't need to spend a lot of time talking about the symbolism of these letters, but you can see that every letter has kind of a pictographic significance. We will look at another chart. Here in this chart, we have the same symbols of the alphabet that we will be referring to, but we have two older examples. So here is the Aleph, the first letter of the alphabet. And remember, it represents an ox head. Here is the oldest known form or shape of letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And in this one, you can see that the shape of this symbol, this Aleph, really bears a lot of resemblance to the ox head. It's not just a symbolic, but it's a kind of an actual portrayal of that. The column here is, this is called the Paleo Hebrew. It's the oldest Hebrew. This is the a form of Hebrew letters that were probably used before the Bible came to be written. If Adam and Eve lived about 4000 BC, then the Bible didn't begin to be written until about 1500 BC. So for 2500 years, there was no Bible. And this left column, the Paleo Hebrew, is probably the Hebrew that was written and read and spoken and so forth in those days. Then when the Bible began to be written, it probably was written in what's called Middle Hebrew. So these letters show up a little bit in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The late Hebrew, this column that we will be using most frequently in our studies, is called the Aramaic script. It became popular after the Babylonian captivity. The alphabet was adopted. Some of the Aramaic terms were assimilated into the Hebrew language. So this is Second Temple era Hebrew alphabet, probably dates from about 450 BC to the 1st century AD. And this is the alphabet we'll be looking at. But anyway, that's kind of a diagram about the pictographic nature of the Hebrew alphabet through the ages and the symbolic, the significance of that alphabet. Now, in our studies, although it might be very interesting to do so, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the pictographic nature of the letters. We're just going to learn the Aramaic script, the late Hebrew alphabet. We're going to learn all the letters, put them together into words and so forth. So we're just going to kind of ignore that lush and beautiful history of the symbolic and pictographic significance of the Hebrew alphabet. One thing that will be very valuable for us to recognize is that almost all Hebrew words are formed by adding prefixes and suffixes to a 3-letter root. There are some, they're called parent roots, that are only 2 letters. And then there are variations of the 2-letter root, but we will be most interested in the 3-letter roots. I would say 90 to 95% of the Hebrew words we will be looking at have 3-letter roots. And if you learn to identify the root, then you will know what the word is. So identifying those 3-letter roots helps you to recognize what is a prefix and what's a suffix. And that will help us figure out what these Hebrew words are. Almost all 3-letter Hebrew roots are verbal. Nouns and other parts of speech have their roots in the verbs, and nouns are usually formed by adding a prefix and maybe what is called an infix. You can add certain letters in the middle of words. That might even separate the 3-letter roots, but still, if we know what letters are infixed, we'll still be able to recognize the 3-letter root and figure out what the word is. Because Hebrew root words are verbal, we know that Hebrew is a very visual, action-oriented language, and that's part of the fun. Here's the study plan. Here's our strategy for Hebrew school. We will learn the Hebrew alphabet and the vowel points, the nikud. And because these lessons are going to be on video, you won't have to worry about keeping up with a class and maybe falling behind and memorizing and becoming familiar with the letters of the alphabet. You can watch these videos as frequently as you want to. You can pause in the middle and write down notes and practice writing the letters and so forth, which I will recommend that you do. So you can learn the Hebrew alphabet at your own pace, at your own rate. And again, that'll be a great advantage for you. We will learn how to read and pronounce Hebrew words. So once we learn all the consonants and the vowels, We'll see how they're put together in words, and we'll learn how to pronounce those words and how to read those words. And we will learn the definitions of those words and how they're used in sentences and so forth. So we'll also learn Hebrew sentence structure. One of the things you might notice is that English almost always has the subject before the verb in a sentence. The verb almost always follows the subject. That's not necessarily true in Hebrew. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the verb comes first, followed by the subject. And that can be one of the challenges of Hebrew, but it's very normal, very natural, and you'll encounter it all the time. We will read lots and lots of Hebrew texts from the Old and the New Testaments, and that is the most fun of studying Hebrew, reading the Bible in the language in which it was written. Even the New Testament, as we mentioned before, came out of a Hebrew culture, so that will be very beneficial, even reading the New Testament in Hebrew. So I hope that will be the most fun part. I hope that's what will keep you interested in coming back for more. In any language course, there are resources that you will need to have or want to have. Rather than recommending a large textbook for you, I'm going to recommend this document right here. It's published by Zondervan. It's called Biblical Hebrew. It's actually kind of a cheat sheet, kind of a Cliff Notes version of a book that was written by Gary Practico and Miles Van Pelt, which is a typical Hebrew grammar. This is just kind of a summary. It is a very large piece of paper that is about twice the size of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It is folded in half and laminated and written on all four sides with just about everything you need to know and you would even want to know about Hebrew grammar. All the charts, all the paradigms, all the, excuse me, all the rules and regulations are here. You can get this on Amazon, probably some other places. It's not very expensive, very helpful. I will be referring to this infrequently and periodically through our studies, but that will be a good resource for you to have. Also, you will want to obtain some kind of a Hebrew text. You're going to want to have some kind of a Hebrew Bible. So you'll be able to practice reading Hebrew. One computer software, Bible software program that I recommend, my favorite one, is called Olive Tree. And what you see on the screen here is the Olive Tree Bible study app as it appears on my cell phone. So this is a screenshot of my cell phone with Genesis 1:1 in English at the top. This is the New King James Version with Strong's numbers at the top. And down below, I have the Hebrew Bible with Hebrew text. It is called the BHS Parsed Bible. BHS stands for, it's a Latin phrase, it stands for Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. That is a Hebrew Bible that has some association with Stuttgart in Germany. And this is the usual, it's the most common text that is used. There are some others that are available today that you might be interested in, but this is available as a software program. And I will be, in a few minutes here, I'll be demonstrating what Olive Tree looks like on my laptop. It looks a little bit different than the way it appears on my cell phone. The Olive Tree Bible Study app is either free or very inexpensive, and I think you can buy it from the App Store with the New King James Version. But if you want the Strong's numbers, that is the Hebrew and Greek study aids, you're going to have to buy the New King James Version Strong's. So I don't know how much that'll cost you, maybe 20 bucks or something like that, 20 or 30. You could easily get by with just the regular New King James Version, or even the Old King James, whatever comes on the app. But you will need to purchase the Hebrew BHS Bible. And if you get it as a parsed Bible, that is a Bible that has all of the study aids, that's going to tell you the 3-letter root word of all these Hebrew words. It's going to tell you the meaning. It's going to tell you the parts of speech. That is what you will be really interested in, and that's what's going to cost you the most. I don't remember how much I paid for my BHS Hebrew parsed Bible, but it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $100. If you just buy a BHS Bible that is not parsed, you'll just get this text with no study aids. And that will be just like having a Hebrew Bible written on paper with no electronic helps, no assistance there. So let me go ahead and show you what Olive Tree Bible looks like on my laptop computer. Okay, here is a text from the Hebrew Bible, BHS Parsed Bible. We're reading from 2 Chronicles 34:29, and here's the Hebrew text, reading from right to left and so forth. And let me just click, I'm going to left click on this word here, Va-ha-Kohanim. If I click on that, this box pops up and it gives me this word. This is here are the 3-letter roots. This is the meaning of that word in this text. It's a reference to a priest. It gives you the parsing. It's a Hebrew word. It's a noun. It's a common noun. It's not like a proper name of a place or a person. So it's a common noun. It is masculine. It's in the plural form. So it's translated in the English Bible, not as a priest, but as priests. And it's an absolute. And we'll learn about absolutes and other forms of words later. Another advantage is I can scroll down here and I can look at the full definition, not just that one word definition, but I can look at a full definition of the word Kohanim from, I think this is Strong's lexicon or dictionary of the Bible. And you can see that you can just go as far as you want. There are lots and lots of, there's a lot of information there about that particular word. Now, again, because I have the New King James Strong's Bible, I can go over here into the English and I can be reading along here and I can wonder what the original Hebrew word is in the text for priests. Now, because we looked it up in the Hebrew, we already know. But if I click on that, look, I get the same thing. I get the 3-letter root, the definitions and so forth. Full definition is available and so forth. So that's an extra benefit with the New King James Strong's Bible. But if you get a BHS, a Hebrew Old Testament that is parsed, then you won't need the Strong's Bible there. So this is a software program that you might want to have. You can see that if you buy resources for it, when you download it from the App Store, it comes with just maybe 1 or 2 things, maybe just the Bible. And if you want a Hebrew Bible, especially one with parsing, you have to buy that. You may want different English versions. You may want different study sources. You can buy those right from the app. You can go to the Olive Tree company that makes this stuff. You can pick out a resource that you want, open an account with them, download it into your Bible software, and you're using it in just a few minutes. So it's a real nice way to accumulate a library. But again, it's fairly expensive. So let's see here. Let me go back to what we were looking at before. One of the disadvantages of Olive Tree is they do have the Old Testament in Hebrew, but they do not have any examples. They don't have any resources that are the New Testament translated into Hebrew. So Olive Tree is my favorite, but because I want the Bible, the New Testament, translated into Hebrew, I have to go elsewhere. And the elsewhere that I have gone is with Accordance of Bible software. Here again, this is a screenshot from my cell phone. I've got the King James version, the old King James, the 1611 version here in the top. And because it has Strong's, it's got those study aids for the English. And down below, I have a document that is the Hebrew New Testament that is translated into Hebrew. So Accordance is not as fun to work with. It's not my preference for software, but it does have the New Testament in Hebrew, and that's why I purchased it. Now, if you don't want to invest in two different kinds of software programs, in Accordance, you can also get the Hebrew Old Testament parsed, the BHS parsed Bible. So you can buy that from Accordance, and you can buy a Hebrew translation, actually a couple of Hebrew translations of the New Testament. And so that's one of the advantages of Accordance is you can get Hebrew materials for both the Old and New Testaments. Now, let me give you my laptop example of Accordance. Here it is. I'll share it with you. Here's what the Accordance Bible software looks like. And I am in the New Testament. Here again, I'm looking at New King James with Strong's. We're looking at Matthew 15, verse 39. And all with the Strong's here, I can do the same thing. I can click on this word boat and see. I should be getting one of those little windows, and I'm not for some reason. Let me see if right-clicking helps. You're supposed to get that little window, but you'll notice down at the bottom of the page, in this lower part here, all I have to do is pass my cursor over that word, and I get the Greek word that translates it. You'll also notice that in the middle column, I have a Greek New Testament, and the word boat is highlighted in the Greek text as well. So there, down in the lower information window, it tells me what that word is, that it's a noun, it's a neuter, singular, accusative case word that means either boat or ship. And one of the helpful things is that in the right-hand column, I have my Hebrew New Testament with Strong's, and the same word is highlighted over here. The Hebrew word for boat in Hebrew is sirah, and this is la sirah, which means to the boat, or in the boat, or via the boat, by means of the boat. I'm not sure why I didn't get those windows. I'm not sure why that's popping up. I think it may be just a thing with Zoom here, but these texts also have the windows. I don't know why it's not popping up on my screen, but we'll worry about that later. This is what Accordance looks like. One of the reasons I don't like it is it's a little bit trickier than Olive Tree. It doesn't work every time like I want it to, but it is valuable if you're just looking to have all of your Hebrew resources in one software program. So that's a good one to get. I think the costs of resources are probably about the same in both of those different software options. Let's go ahead to the next. If you would prefer to just buy paper books, if you would like to buy a paper Hebrew Old Testament and a Hebrew New Testament. Here are some Amazon pages that offer both. This is the JPS, or Jewish Publication Society, Hebrew English Tanakh. Tanakh is an acronym that stands for Torah, Naviim, and Ketuvim, which is 3 Hebrew words that means the law, like the law of Moses, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. The Naviim is the prophets, and the Ketuvim is the holy writings, like Psalms and Proverbs and so forth. So basically it's the whole Old Testament. No New Testament here. This is just the Old Testament. And make sure you get it in Hebrew and English. If you get this Bible, you can also buy it in just Hebrew, and every page is going to be Hebrew, and it'll just be a mystery to you. But if you get the Hebrew and English version, then on one page you'll have Hebrew, and on the facing page you'll have English, and that will help you. And the same is true of Hebrew, English, New Testaments. Make sure you get Hebrew, English. If we look at the price of these, they're both around 20 bucks. So you can get them for that, or even cheaper. You can get them used, get them from Amazon, get them from eBay. There may be other resources you can go to. Just search on Hebrew, English, Old Testament, or Hebrew, English, New Testament, and you'll get stuff like this. There are several versions, several translations of the Hebrew New Testament. I don't think it matters which one you choose or you buy, just so you've got a Hebrew text that you can practice with and read. This document, this Bible, is a really nice one. It is sold by the Bible Society in Israel, which is an organization that I like to support with financially with purchases. And you can order from them a Hebrew English Bible that is both Old Testament and New Testament, with the New American Standard Bible or New American Standard Version on one side of the page and the Hebrew Bible on the other side of the page. This one's leather bound. You can get them hardback. The hardback is obviously cheaper. A leather bound version runs you about $68 from them. It's well worth it. It's Old Testament and New Testament in one volume. The only drawback to this, for me anyway, is that the fonts in both the Hebrew and the English are very small, a little bit challenging to read. Bible Society in Israel also produces some software of this same volume. It's called Haktuvim. So if you go on the internet to haktuvim.co.il, company in Israel, you can download this program. I think it's free. If it's not free, it doesn't cost much, but you can download it and you can get a BSI Hebrew Bible, Bible Society in Israel Hebrew Bible, with modern Hebrew, Hebrew New Testament. Here is the Hebrew text, and then on the facing page is that New American Standard Bible with the English text. And you can see that the Hebrew words are highlighted and defined. All that study guide stuff is available for you down at the bottom of the, in the information window at the bottom of the page. This is a great resource, very cost effective. Couple of drawbacks is it's easy to, like if you go to a text, say, Matthew 12 or something like that, it's easy to lose your place in this. So the functioning of the software is sometimes tricky and it can be frustrating. Another drawback is that the fonts, especially of the Hebrew, are very small and hard to read. Now, you may be looking at the screen and saying, that's not so bad, I can read that pretty well. But if you look at it on an iPhone or even an iPad, it's a very small text and can kind of strain your eyes. But I mean, this is a really good way to go. It's a great program with some drawbacks, but obviously the price is right on that one. I mentioned some other online resources that you can take advantage of, and one of them that I recommend is a website called Holy Language Institute. It is created and run by a Hebrew teacher named Izzy Avraham. His actual real name is Israel Avraham. He is Jewish, but he is a believer in Yeshua. He is a Messianic Jew, and he is a Hebrew scholar and enjoys being a Hebrew teacher. Two things that his website offers, and I should mention at the outset that HebrewLanguage.com is a subscription website. So it'll cost you $20 a month to get all the resources that they have available. Some of those resources might save you some money on Bible software or books that you would buy. So he's got a lot of free stuff, but it's only free if you pay the $20 a month. Two programs that are available at Holy Language Institute are Hebrew Quest, which is a 40-lesson course on biblical Hebrew. It like comes from a Hebrew grammar book, so there are some kind of slow parts of it, but it's very thorough. Izzy is a real interesting teacher. This is a picture of him when he was a young man, teaching Hebrew Quest, teaching the 40-lesson course on biblical Hebrew. And then Hebrew Verses is the one that I spend the most time on. It's Izzy's teaching on the Hebrew texts of both the Old and the New Testament. And here's a picture of older Izzy teaching from the Hebrew New Testament. This appears to be the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 1. So here's his version of the Hebrew New Testament. If you go to his website and look at his videos on that, on his Hebrew Verses, he uses a text with much larger fonts, so you won't have any trouble reading that. And he just goes through the text and he pronounces the word in Hebrew and says what it means, and sometimes he teaches on those words. So Izzy is a great teacher, and Holy Language Institute may be something that you will want to look into. I am kind of ending this this introductory lesson just by showing you a text from a Bible program that I will be using for these lessons. Interestingly enough, I'm not going to be using my favorite olive tree, although I might use it sometimes. Normally, I'm going to be using a different program called BibleWorks. BibleWorks is a biblical language program that I've been using for years, like 40 years, maybe not that long, maybe 30 years, for a long time. And it's an older program. Unfortunately, the manufacturers of BibleWorks went out of business a few years ago. So you you can't download it from their website anymore. Although if you shop around on Amazon or eBay, you might be able to get the program discs, DVDs that you can have in a box and you can load up on basically any computer. The program still works fine on modern computers. You just can't get any assistance from them, and you can't download the programs. Now, if you are able to find the discs, the program discs, they'll cost you a pretty penny, probably around $300, something like that, which is what the program cost initially. But it's a great program, and like I say, I've been using it for years. This is the text of Genesis 1:1. I cut and pasted it from BibleWorks. But I'm going to close this lesson by actually going to the BibleWorks software, so you can see what that looks like. And we will look at the same verse. So here is BibleWorks. In the middle column, we have our English New King James Version with Strong's helps information of Genesis 1:1. So that's the English New King James Version. Here we have the Hebrew Old Testament of Genesis 1:1. And down below that, we have the Septuagint version, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. That was translated 200 or 300 years before Yeshua lived. So let me go ahead and read this text to you from the Hebrew Old Testament, first verse of the Bible. It reads, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et haaretz. Now, one of the things I hope that you noticed as I was reading through that, and as I was passing my cursor along, is I get that little window right below or beside the word that's got a definition, explains the parts of speech and so forth of the word that I'm hovering over for virtually every word of the Hebrew Bible. And at the same time, over in the large window to the right, I have about all the information in the world you would ever want to know about those words. So the first word I read there, Bereshit, in the right-hand column here, it tells me what the three-letter root is. It's Rosh. It tells me all of the different variations of the word Rosh. It tells me the meaning of the word Rosh. Primarily, it means head, but it can also mean leader. It can mean origin. It can mean one who has authority over another. It can just mean multiple things. Look at all the information you can get just on that one word. As we look at these words, Bereshith, one of the things it tells us is that the first letter, the ba in Bereshith, the b or bet, is a particle preposition. So I know that because this is a prefix, that here is the root word. Bereshith in English means in the beginning. The second word here is bara. It's a verb, and it means to create, specifically to create out of nothing. And we learn here in the information on bara in the right-hand column that bara is a verb. It's a simple verb, call, very straightforward. It's in the perfect tense as opposed to the continuing action tense, imperfect. It's a third person masculine singular word. So one of the things I want you to take note of is that it is a singular verb. The subject of the sentence is this word, Elohim. Elohim is the most common word for God in the Bible, so God created. But the unique thing about this word Elohim is that it too is it's a noun. It's a common, not a personal term. So it's just describing God in kind of generic terms. It is a masculine plural noun. Now, one of the things that you learn in the grammar of any language is that verbs always agree in number with the subject. But here we've got a subject, God, that's in the plural, and the verb is in the singular. So that's either an example of bad grammar in the Bible in the very first verse, or there's a deeper, more meaningful reason for this sentence to be arranged that way. And that is that the word Elohim is in the Hebrew, but it's never translated as gods. It is always or almost always translated as God, because the Bible reveals God to be one thing. Famous Shema from Deuteronomy, Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, asserts the oneness of God. But he exists in three persons. He exists as the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which is three persons and accounts for the plural being used in the word Elohim. So the bara is associated with the singularity of God. There's only one God, but he does exist in three persons. So the oneness refers not so much to numerical personages as it does to unity. When God created Adam and Eve, he said the two shall become one. So there's a man and a woman, they get married, they're still two separate persons, but the Bible says they're one. That means they are unified. They become a team, they become a unit, they become a couple. And so here in the very first verse of the Bible, we learn from the verb bara and the noun Elohim that God is plural. He is triune, he is threefold, but yet there's only one God. Let me go also to a verse from the New Testament, and that will be John chapter 1, verse 1. So here again, we have the New King James Version of the Bible with all the study guides, the Strong's helps. We also have a Greek New Testament, since the most valuable text will be the Greek New Testament. But here we have actually two versions of the Hebrew New Testament. But notice as I pass the cursor over these words of the Hebrew New Testament, there's no study helps. In fact, that window says there is no note available for this verse, actually for this version. So the study helps are going to have to come from either the English or the Greek. But let me read this verse to you from the Franz Delitzsch translation of the Greek New Testament into Hebrew. This is John 1:1. Bereshit. Now that should sound familiar because it's also the first word of Genesis 1:1, the creation story. So John starts with the creation story. Bereshit, in the beginning. Haya hadavar, was the word. Ve hadavar, and the word. Haya was. Et ha Elohim, the word was God. Ve Elohim haya hadavar, and God was the word. Actually, this says he was with a God. Et in this case means with. So the word was with God, and the word was God. Now, the word in context here is talking about Yeshua, the Messiah, Jesus Christ, referring to him as the Word, and affirming and asserting that Jesus Christ was with God in the beginning when all things were created, and he was God. So he is one of the three persons of the Trinity, and he is divine himself. Always was, even during his incarnation, he continued to be divine. And now, in the wake of his resurrection and ascension into heaven, he continues to be divine. And the Bible will tell us that he will come again to judge the living and the dead. He will come in power and great glory to rule his creation, and for that we rejoice. So that is the brings us to the end of the introduction here. I want to thank you for joining me, and hopefully you made it all the way through this, and I hope you will join me for future lessons from Hebrew School. So let me sign off by giving you the blessing, a well-known blessing, first in Hebrew, and then I will give it to you in English, and then we will conclude. The Hebrew blessing goes, Yivarechecha Adonai vayishmarecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yuchunecha, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. And that means the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. So I bid you farewell. Shalom.